And you were talking about what's the main differences between homesteading and farming? Because I think you cover both really well. So what are some main differences and how do they really relate also?
Well, so the technical term, like if you want to be an actual farmer, according to the USDA, you need to make over $1,000 in sales to be labeled as
Okay.
a farmer. Now, I have always kind of struggled with that because I consider myself a first generation farmer, but I live here in Nebraska, and the farmers here are row crop farmers. So they've got a couple hundred acres, couple thousand acres, and they're growing corn, beans, wheat. I don't grow any of that. So it's hard for me to go to the local co-op and say I'm a farmer because what I'm doing is more vegetables and I'm doing chickens and I'm doing goats and sheep. And so I don't really try to get caught up in labels too much just because I think as long as for me, the definition of being a farmer is you're growing something that you're able to then either eat yourself, provide for the community, or there's even like agritourism. You could be
Oh
considered a
yeah.
farmer if you're doing agritourism, and even education at this point. There's a lot of nonprofit farms that are popping up to try and help school kids come out and learn some hands-on skills. And so I don't get too worried about the definition of farming. I think as long as you're somehow related to agriculture and growing food, connected to the land, that counts.
That's awesome. And like if you're homesteading, are there a lot of like tourism opportunities for that too? I imagine because I feel like there's been a boom of people that want to homestead.
Yeah, I think homesteading obviously is picking up a lot more than farming because in row crop farming, there's just so many barriers to entry, the cost of
Mm.
land, the cost of the equipment, even the knowledge that goes into that. Whereas homesteading, you only need a few acres. And so that is an option for a lot of people. And yeah, there's this resurgent, a revolution of people wanting to grow their own food. And so homesteading's really taken off, especially during the pandemic. That kind of seemed to be when people saw there's no food on the shelves. Well, maybe I should try to grow my own tomatoes. And so homesteading is really where all the buzz is. But at the same time, you don't want to forget about the farmers that are, providing 98% of the food.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like if you're homesteading like a small percentage, like you're not going to completely replace like having to go to the store.
Yeah.
I mean, like let's say like what would be the easiest place to start homesteading? Like for example, I live in Panama City, Florida, and I've got like shoot, I think like 0.2 acres maybe. I want to get some chickens, but we live in like a suburb, so I don't think the chickens would be allowed.
Sure.
So, like if somebody wants to start homesteading, what would be the easiest path to entry?
So I always say chickens because they're one of the most universal. I mean, you can raise them pretty much anywhere in the United States, and even internationally, obviously. There really isn't like a perfect place to homestead. It's wherever you can find land. And as long as there's a lot of people in Arizona that have started to do it, as long as you've got access to irrigation.
Mm.
My business partner, Tyler Froberg, lives in Texas, and they're able to grow 365 days out of the year. And I've always been kind of jealous of that because I have a window, a very specific window here in Nebraska. We're in zone 5. So um, I'm jealous that he can grow that much. But then at the same time, I have a lot of advantages where I have an off season where I can prepare, I can plan, I can
Mm.
reevaluate what I'm doing, and kind of grow a lot of other things that you can't grow down in Texas, even because of our cooler climate. So it really depends on what you're wanting to raise and what you're wanting to grow on where to homestead. But the best way to start is, I think, chickens. There's a reason they're called the gateway to homesteading because it's a great way to learn how to manage animals. Rabbits are actually really good if you can
Oh,
stomach
okay.
rabbit meat. Rabbits are a great way to get started. Honeybees, if you can raise honey, because you don't need a lot of land for that, because they'll go into the neighbors without being caught for trespassing. So bees are a good thing
True.
to start with. Um, and then as far as vegetables, I always say grow what you want to eat. Everybody says tomatoes, peppers, you got your staples, beans, corn, whatever. That's fine. But if you end up spending all this time and you grow something that you don't actually like, you're not going to be as invested in growing that. So that was one of the mistakes I made. I was focused on growing stuff for everybody else. And then kind of at the end of the day was like, well, I personally don't actually eat that many tomatoes. So I don't care if this tomato doesn't do well. I love carrots. So I spent lots of time trying to learn how to grow carrots.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, but I got to ask you about carrots because I'm the same way. I love them and I grew them. But honestly, I didn't do a really good job of like researching like the nutrients in the soil. And after like 4 months, the carrot that I had was literally an inch.
Yeah.
And I was like, all that work for
Yeah.
that little bit. So like, what advice would you have for like growing carrots like very well?
So the key to carrots, kind of with everything, this is a generic comment, but is consistent watering. And so if you
Mm,
get too much water, they're going to split. And if you don't get enough water, they're just not going to put down that tuber. And the interesting thing about carrots is what you're trying to grow is the root system. And so you actually
right. Yeah.
don't want to water them like every day. You're not trying to keep them moist. You actually want to let that root try to grow down to get some moisture. So I always say like a really thick watering. So do about an inch a week. Again, this is going to depend on where you're at. So I don't want to give advice that's across the board. But for here, it's about an inch a week. And then let that soil dry out a little bit. Let that root try to grow down. But then don't let it get too dry. Otherwise, it just isn't going to get as big as you want.
That's good advice. I need to try that again whenever we start like a summer or spring
Do
garden.
you know
Because
what variety you planted?
no, I just picked them up from Home Depot. It was like a
Okay.
little packet of carrots, and I think that also might have been the problem. Just the
Yeah.
generic carrots. I think next time I need to select the right carrot for the right environment. Like, what advice do you have for that? Like selecting the right seeds.
Yeah, so having the right variety is going to be really key to your
Mm.
environment, and then soil types. So like with the carrots that we've got, they really like sandy soil. So we actually brought in some sand into our soil to
Mm.
try and loosen it up a little bit. And that definitely helps. Just do your research on picking the right variety. That's one of those things I get asked all the time. Oh, what variety do you plant for this? I don't know. I'm not an expert in your zone. So like I can't really
Mm.
provide you with the exact seed variety that we use. I can tell you some good places to go. We use Haas garden seeds. We use Baker Creek, and then Burpee's a staple. You can kind of find that anywhere, but those are three really good resources for where you can go. If you like pelleted stuff, Johnny's is good too, but that's a little more for the commercial if you're doing large scale, like if you're
Mm.
doing more than an acre's worth.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something that I mean still blows my mind. Like all the different varieties of fruits and vegetables out there. I mean, with carrots, I'm sure there was probably hundreds of them that you could get for obviously different types of carrots, and then different zones. And of course, this is rhetorical, but I want to hear your input. So, where can I get seeds for baby carrots?
So baby carrots is actually its own. We had a guy on our podcast that actually grew carrots, Zach Wartiska, and I don't remember what the variety is that they grew the baby carrots. I wish I had an answer for you. They used to, because I asked him, does this like a tiny carrot? They used to just trim down like a regular carrot, and now there's
Yeah.
actual like varieties where you can get. They're smaller.
Oh.
They're smaller, so they pack all the flavor into a smaller package of carrot, and then they just kind of trim it down a little bit.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, I'm just going to say that carrot that I planted was a baby carrot
There
because it
you
was so
go.
small,
Yeah,
and we
baby
just
carrot
didn't
variety.
know.
Yep,
There
yep.
you go. And then going back to the chicken thing, because I want that, like, that's my first thing. I want to get chickens eventually. I've heard though that there are like silent breeds of chickens that don't cluck. Is that right?
Yes, there are. I don't have any of them, so I don't know any off the top of my head. We live out in the country, so we don't have to worry about neighbors
Yeah.
and all that. But yes, there are some varieties that will not. They don't make any noise. And honestly, the hens don't make a lot of noise either. It's really the
Hmm.
roosters that are your problem, and that's why a lot of places will have chicken laws that you can't have, or they'll say you can have four chickens but no roosters.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I looked it up in our area, and the rule was actually kind of cool. It's that you could have them as long as you got permission from your neighbors.
Yep.
And we've got two neighbors. One neighbor's pretty chill. I'm pretty sure they would let us, but then another one's like an older couple, and so I'm pretty sure they would not appreciate the chickens. So I'm
Yeah,
like
they're not a
to try
fan.
to figure that out. But maybe if we give them some eggs every couple of days, that might kind of even out.
That's the nice thing about having something a food product
Yeah,
everyone eats,
yeah.
right? Everybody's got to eat. So you've got something that you can share with your neighbors and kind of sweeten the pot a little bit.